Detective Conan is one of Japan's most iconic series. Since its premiere in 1996, it has consistently delivered brilliant mysteries and complex cases, which is why it remains a major part of anime culture even to this day. Conan Edogawa himself is built as a modern successor to Sherlock Holmes, and across the series, his intelligence is pushed again and again through some of the toughest cases in fiction. So in this video, we're going to break down Conan's best display of intellect, deduction, psychology, planning, and everything that defines how his mind works. By the end, you have a clear picture of just how smart Conan truly is. But before that, if you enjoy this type of content, the goal is 20k, so if you enjoy, sub up. To properly evaluate Conan's intelligence, we're breaking it down into 5 core categories: full-scale IQ/intelligence, emotional intelligence, logical reasoning, manipulation, and strategy and planning. So, for our first metric of FSIQ, we'll be using the Wessler Adult Intelligence Scale, which breaks cognitive ability into multiple subcategories. A character who consistently performs well across these subcategories represents a higher overall level of intelligence. So with that in mind, let's begin. Verbal Comprehension Index, the ability to use or show language or general knowledge/intelligence involving language. Conan's verbal comprehension is focused on his ability to decode information under extreme pressure. A lot of the time, we see him break down hidden meanings, interpret coded messages, and identify crucial clues buried in wording that others overlook. Let's take a look at a couple of feats in this subcategory, starting from the 12 million hostage code. This is perhaps his most broken display of linguistic processing under pressure. Conan decoded a multi-layered riddle with only 3 seconds remaining before a bomb detonated. To add extra context, with a bomb seconds away from detonation and quote-unquote 12 million civilians' lives hanging in the balance, Conan was forced to solve a multi-layered linguistic riddle designed specifically to be unsolvable within that time frame. The bomber had inserted fake sentences, misleading metaphors, and multi-language wordplay to ensure that even a genius detective would fold under pressure. However, Conan didn't. He immediately recognized that Major Leaguer wasn't referencing to baseball at all. It was hidden instructions to convert the entire message into English. Then, in that same breath, he interpreted good stopper as a reference to a pitcher with high earned run average, or ERA. By identifying that extra inning game meant extra, he linguistically subtracted ERA from extra and leaving XT. Then it got even crazier. Conan mentally rotated XT, recognizing that the new shape matched the kanji for school or bun, and deduced the next target or second bomb was at a school's facility. At that exact moment, he noticed the bomb's LCD flashing EVIT, immediately identifying it as detective spelled backwards. That led him to the Japanese equivalent of detective, which is tante, and then he reversed that to teitan, pinpointing Teitan High School. With all of this, the final bomb destination or the second bomb location was identified with 3 seconds left, or within 3 seconds. This showed linguistic intelligence under a scenario where misunderstanding a single term will result in millions dead. Obviously, there are multiple components to this other than VCI involved, but the VCI that was actually displayed in this was on an insane level. Conan seamlessly switched between English and Japanese decoding, then leveraged sports terminology as semantic ciphers, manipulated letters as symbols in space or visually, which linked 2 completely separate clues gained at different moments. Then did all of this while actively doing bomb defusal inside a confined tower or Tokyo Tower, making it an absolutely broken feat to start. And I'll go in depth to the other components to the feat later on in the video. As for his second feat, it is a testament to his cognitive functions combined with verbal understanding. Upon discovering the corpse of an FBI agent, Conan caught a brief glimpse of a smartphone screen displaying 2 incoherent ciphers consisting of 71 separate dashes and dots. While running home to contact Akai and evacuating the detective boys, Conan was simultaneously holding all 71 symbols in active working memory. Then identified mirrored symbols out of alignment, while also performing mental reverse mirroring and column realignment, removing intentional visual distractions like a flipped V disguised as a U that allowed him to merge the 2 ciphers into one mentally. It may be hard to grasp grasp how impressive this is, but essentially the result was that he successfully decoded the specific address, date, and time of the FBI secret meeting. Essentially, he performed cryptanalysis that typically requires pen, paper, and time purely mentally and while physically exerting himself. Now, moving on. As for a third feat, Conan is working under a different condition. In the Kiddin's horn case, Kid incapacitates Conan with a taser. However, Conan maintains or acts out his pretense of unconscious. This is important context because the feat is all about proving how Conan's thinking operates. While quote-unquote out cold, Conan recalls a pillar inscription tied to revealing the hidden Kiddin statue. One who desires to find Kiddin without depending on the correct way must devote themselves to changing. Instead of treating this something extremely poetic, he extracts the functional meaning behind it. If the statue can be revealed without using the keys, then the instruction for obtaining the Kiddin horn without the correct method is essentially telling you go with the flow. That single phrase becomes a hinge to the entire solution. From there, Conan locks onto what changing must imply in this riddle's symbolic language. In this context, devoting oneself to changing is a clue about entrusting yourself to cyclical ordered change, which naturally points to the flow of seasons. The word flow then points to four divine beasts, with each pedestal representing one beast: Seiryu, Suzaku, Byakko, and Genbu. And the mapping completes a chain. Seiryu equals spring, Suzaku equals summer, Byakko equals autumn, and Genbu equals winter. So putting it all together, Conan reaches the mechanical conclusion that the connected Kiddin statue will be revealed when only 4 individuals lean on each pedestal in the order of spring, summer, autumn, winter, effectively entrusting one's body to the season of flow. What's so impressive about this feat is that it merges symbolic reasoning with precise real-world activation sequences while Conan is physically compromised and strategically pretending to be unconscious, showcasing high-level memory recall and complex riddle integration under pressure. To finish off VCI, in movie 25, he comprehended and interpreted the monologue of a Russian officer to solve the case, a language notoriously difficult for Japanese speakers due to its distinctive grammatical structures. He can also obviously speak Japanese and English, as well as not being fluent, but has enough knowledge of German and French for him to use to solve cases. Now, moving on to cognitive processing ability. In Conan's case, working memory, processing speed, cognitive proficiency, and visual spatial index usually all operate together. So, for this section, we're combining all these abilities into his overall cognitive processing ability, and we'll break down his most impressive mental feats one at a time. To start off, at the peak of Conan's cognitive processing and visual spatial index, there's a calculation of ballistics, velocity, and timing that rivals the processing power of a supercomputer, which occurs in movie 24, The Scarlet Bullet. The scenario of this involves a vacuum tube maglev train hurling towards Tokyo at a staggering 1,000 km per hour. Akai Shuichi, positioned at 130 miles away, fires a specially designed silver bullet. And this is not a standard sniper shot we know of. The bullet must travel from a stationary position, enter the vacuum tunnel, ride the electromagnetic field generated by the train's lift magnets to maintain velocity without air resistance, and impact a specific target inside the moving train. However, some of you may be wondering, isn't it Akai who shot the bullet? While yes, Akai pulled the trigger, but it was Conan who engineered the landing of it. Akai could predict the bullet's path, but he could not predict the exact position of the culprit inside the chaotic moving environment of the train cabin. Conan effectively became a guide to ensure it would hit the target in a non-lethal position. He had to mentally synchronize the bullet's arrival time with the train's deceleration. As well as in real time, while managing the threat of the culprit, he guided her movements so that her body would occupy the precise geometric coordinate where the bullet would intercept with the cabin's window. Therefore, his aim wasn't to actually eliminate the target, but to hit a non-lethal area of the shoulder, adding a layer of the ethical complexity of his calculation. What makes it so impressive is that this feat required a 4-dimensional spatial map in Conan's mind. He He had to visualize the bullet traveling at 800 to 1000 meters per second across over 100 miles of terrain and vacuum tunnel, even accounting for the bullet's transition from open air or wind to drag to the tunnel's magnetic field. Simultaneously, he mapped the interior of the 7-compartment train car. He calculated the angles of entry relative to the train's speed and the positioning of the target relative to the window. Then, finally, he adjusted this mental model mid-flight. As the train decelerated and the bullet maintained velocity, the intersection point shifted. So, Conan had to update his mental simulation instantaneously to ensure the bullet didn't hit him or miss entirely. A truly inhumane combination of a sniper and a detective. Moving on. This silver bullet calculation was a feat that was very impressive, having to render calculations in real time. However, in this next feat, Conan demonstrated the ability to access a mind palace so detailed it rendered architecture in real time. While sitting motionless on a sofa inside a building, staring into empty space, Conan needed to identify a critical geographical anomaly within the Shibuya district to solve the case. This means he has no sight of the outside world, having to rely solely on memory. But then, he mentally retrieved and reconstructed a 3D model of the Shibuya district. This wasn't some vague recollection of street names, but an actual high-fidelity topographical map. He then populated this mental simulation by cross-referencing fragmented memories from various past incidents and events he had witnessed in the area. He stitched these isolated data points together to form a cohesive living map of the city blocks. The level of detail in this visualization was so microscopic that he did not just see the buildings, he mentally calculated their dimensions, length and width, and relative height to determine spatial relationships. He analyzed traffic components and road layouts within the mental construct, verifying the geometry of intersections and street flow. Then, he held this massive dataset encompassing potentially 50 plus streets and structures in his working memory, while simultaneously running analytical queries against the model to find the contradiction he needed. This is the ultimate definition of VSI, as Conan took 2D memories and 3D experiences, flattened them into data, and then reprojected them as a fully navigatable 3D environment in his mind's eye to measure physical distance without moving an inch, to then reconnect the dots to a hint he needed to solve the case. Moving on. While the previous feat demonstrated Conan's mastery over physics and spatial geometry, this feat highlights his raw computational processing power. He effectively turns his brain into a search engine, scanning, indexing, and cross-referencing massive datasets in seconds. The context is that a surgeon, Dr. Ogawa, has been receiving mysterious gifts and flowers for his son every month for 3 years. Conan suspects these are not gifts of gratitude, but a countdown to a revenge killing. To identify the sender, Conan must find a patient with a specific connection to the doctor from a specific time frame. So, Conan gained access to the hospital storage room containing 3 years worth of patient registration files. And a busy hospital sees thousands of patients annually. Conan had to physically flip through stacks of paper records, absorbing thousands of names, dates, medical conditions, and surgical outcomes. But of course, the witness, Lan, observed him moving with such velocity that his hand produced after images. Or what I imagine is him basically flicking through pages and memorizing them instantly. Therefore, he was reading rows and columns of dense medical text faster than the human eye could track. Or a very easy way to describe it is that he was taking a photo of each page and keeping it in his working memory to access later. He then instantly discarded any patient who didn't fit the 3 years ago timeline. From cross-referencing in his working memory, he correlated the remaining list against the specific date, August 3rd, the date the flowers always arrived. Then, he identified patients with surgical complications or deaths on that specific date to find a motive for revenge. The result of this was, from a dataset of thousands, he instantaneously isolated Tomoya Ogino, a child who died under the doctor's care, as the only logical link, identifying the sender, the father, before the crime could take place. With now cognitive processing done, I will now cover Conan's crystallized intelligence. This category evaluates his accumulated knowledge, learned skills, and ability to access information from long-term memory to solve problems. Unlike cognitive functions, which handles problems, this measures his encyclopedic database and how he retrieves information to solve cases. A clean example example is the Moonlight Saunter murder case, where Conan applies the simple forensic detail that human blood takes around 20 minutes to fully dry, helping him confirm that the culprit faked the time of death, which is a classic showing of stored knowledge used at a perfect time. Another standout is the red painted wall case, where Conan applies his understanding of color contrast phenomenon to correctly deduce the dying message left by the victim. This case is regarded as one of the hardest cases in the series, which makes Conan's success here an even stronger testament to how reliable he converts specialized knowledge into real-world solutions. And these are just 2 examples out of thousands. So moving forward, while many detectives can recite facts, Conan shows something more subtle but rare, which is a real-time, survival-grade application of knowledge under active pursuit. During FBI agent Camel's escape from the Black Organization, Camel is trapped by Vermouth and Kid, injured and forced to drive off a bridge into a river, escaping by swimming to an island shore. With no safe margin for error, Conan and Akai guiding him remotely on how to survive and stay invisible. Conan advises Camel to ignite a fire using a battery and a gun pack, which successfully heats the exhausted Camel, restores his energy, and helps dry his wet clothes, with Camel also using a discarded cooler and ice packs as a part of the warming process. Again, this is very subtle, but it's practical intelligence under threat, grounded in Conan's understanding of first aid, the dangers of wet clothes, and improvised procedures involving the battery, gun pack, coffee bean sack, and straw for warmth and concealment. And the moment concealment becomes life or death, Conan escalates his improvisation further. He guides Camel to use sand and olive oil for camouflage, then later fetch a coffee bean bag, scalpel, tape, and copying paper, wear Akai's fake blood cap, and relocate to a hidden forest position, enabling a makeshift defensive setup and supporting the operation to keep Camel concealed and ultimately fake his death when the organization arrives. And I'll cover the details to this insane strategy later on in the video, as this is a small feat demonstrated in a larger tactic. However, the takeaway from this is simple. Conan can utilize everyday knowledge for survival, even when the enemy is already closing in. As for his novel problem solving or reasoning feats, I will cover later on in the logical reasoning section. But as for now, let me fill you in a bit more on how much knowledge Conan actually has. He has a clear understanding of advanced academics. For physics, he understands the physics of light scattering, why the ocean is blue. He even demonstrates applied understanding of electromagnetic principles in high-level scenario contexts. And he shows practical applied survival science, using limited materials to generate heat and prevent exposure in high-risk scenarios. For chemistry, he possesses knowledge for chemical reactions, such as how bleaching agents neutralize cyanide and the properties of acid versus bases. He also understands chemical indicators like phenolphthalein and ammonia. He also has encyclopedic expertise in cellular biology, specifically regarding hemoglobin, iron, content in red blood cells, and how antibodies/antigens interact in blood typing. He is also an expert in forensics and criminology, covering pathology, as he knows the precise dying time of human blood, approximately 20 minutes, to determine the time of death. He can identify specific poisons by smell, like cyanide/almonds, and taste, as well as investigative analysis, as he can discern professional backgrounds from physical calluses, identifying a surgeon by diagonal scars and disinfecting smell, an EI practitioner by cuts on the hand, or a marksman by calluses on the index finger. And as I covered a bit before, he has linguistic mastery. Beyond his native Japanese, he's fluent in English and possesses an understanding of Portuguese, using it to eavesdrop on a conversation between his father and a Brazilian associate. However, this extends to codes. He recognizes and leverages specialized communication systems when displayed on screen, such as Braille in the London Arc. As for his practical survival and engineering, he understands how to create fire using battery and a foil gum wrapper, but as well as architecture, as he can mentally blueprint complex structures, identifying hidden rooms by analyzing ceiling heights and structural inconsistencies. And some miscellaneous trivia is his gambling strategy. He deduced a card counting cheating system involving a monkey's hand signal in poker, but he also has cultural knowledge, as he has deep knowledge of literature like Sherlock Holmes and mystery novels, as well as possessing music knowledge like reading scores and rhythms, but he's still somehow horrible at singing. Next, we move on to emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is all about understanding and managing emotions, both your own and those of others. It's a set of skills that helps you navigate the complexities of social interactions and relationships. While emotional intelligence has both intrapersonal and interpersonal sides, the focus for measuring it in people usually stems from the interpersonal side, as someone with good emotional intelligence will always be capable in the intrapersonal side no matter what. Hence, interpersonal takes more importance when dictating emotional intelligence. So with that said, let's see how Conan scales in the 4 corners of emotional intelligence. First off, emotional perception. But before we dive into Conan's feat, let's establish what emotional perception actually means. Emotional perception is the ability to perceive emotions in others through facial expressions, body language, pictures, voices, and so on. This is the foundational skill of emotional intelligence, the ability to accurately read and recognize emotional states in others through observable cues. Now, let's examine Conan's 3 most impressive demonstrations of this ability. First off is him reading Jin's true nature from eyes alone. This occurs at the very beginning of the series when Kudo Shinichi, before becoming Conan, first encounters Jin at Tropical Land. This is their first meeting. Kudo has never seen this man before, has no prior information about him, and Jin's outward appearance is completely inconspicuous to the general public. So to everyone else, Jin just looks like a tall man in black clothing. Despite this being a first encounter with 0 prior knowledge, Kudo immediately discerns Jin's emotions of murderous intent from his facial expressions, particularly by focusing on his eyes, then accurately speculates that Jin is an apathetic serial killer. What makes this impressive is that Kudo has absolutely no background information on this individual. He's working purely from visual perception in a chance encounter. Jin's appearance is described as inconspicuous to the public, meaning he's successfully presenting a normal exterior that doesn't trigger alarms in others. It is only Kudo who sees through this mask. Therefore, he doesn't just sense danger or bad vibes, but he specifically identifies Jin's murderous intent, apathy, and nature of being a serial killer, all from just facial expressions, primarily the eyes. This assessment proves to be completely accurate, as Jin is indeed a high-ranking assassin in a criminal organization who kills without remorse. There is also another feat of Conan identifying a mother-son relationship from just 7 words. The context of this is that during an investigation at an abandoned house involving a missing, presumed dead paternal husband, Conan is eavesdropping on a conversation between a female and another individual. He has limited information, with just fragments of conversation without full context, as well as a history of the house and a photo he saw in a room just then. However, when the female utters just 7 words, "It's because I'm thinking of your future," Conan immediately recognizes the underlying dynamics of the relationship. From this single phrase, he's able to ascertain that both individuals are mother and son. He does this by recognizing the mother's tendency towards overprotectiveness in her tone and word choice, while also inferring a sense of guilt or unease within the son. But he also gets a slight glimpse of what the son looked like, even while looking way different from 5 years ago. Now, this feat may not sound impressive to some with just this context, so let me elaborate a bit more. 7 words, that's all Conan has to work with, meaning he's only eavesdropping, so he's working primarily from vocal tone and the semantic context of a brief phrase. From there, Conan identifies the specific familiar relationship of mother-son and not wife-husband or siblings, etc. From there, he ultimately links all of it together to come up with 2 possible conclusions for the case. So, this feat showcases how Conan's emotional perception extends beyond just visual cues. He can extract complex emotional and relational information from minimal auditory data, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of how specific language choices reflect underlying emotional states and relationship dynamics. With now covering 2 types of emotional perception, let's move on to emotional engagement/facilitation. Emotional facilitation, also known as emotional engagement, and it's the second activity proposed by the ability model that relates to a person's ability to use emotions, whether it's in their own emotions or another person's emotions, in order to achieve a desired outcome. Seeing, we'll be focusing on emotional facilitation in others. It's important to simplify this definition, as it doesn't simply refer to any form of emotional manipulation, but also the ability to understand how to deal with emotions in other people, when to engage with said people and when not to achieve a desired outcome. First off, we have the Holmes Apprentice Declaration. This feat is often misunderstood as simple communication. In reality though, it's a high showing in remote behavioral regulation. Conan demonstrated the ability to stabilize a psychological causality from the stands of a stadium, transforming a terrified victim into a high-functioning tactical asset in seconds. In this scenario, during the Wimbledon finals, world champion Minerva Glass was being psychologically tortured. The terrorist Hades had rigged her mother with a bomb and was watching from the stands. He ordered Minerva to lose specific points to manipulate the betting odds. If she disobeyed, her mother died. Minerva was attempting a desperate gambit as she was relying on Braille to communicate with the audience. She intended to hit her returns into specific spots on the court to spell out a message. However, the sheer terror of the situation was eroding her fine motor skills, as well as her gradually losing confidence, thinking if only Holmes was there to help her, she would succumb to the isolation of facing a faceless killer alone. It's at that exact moment that Conan stood up and screamed, "I'm Holmes' apprentice." This wasn't something just random, but by invoking Holmes, he sent a coded psychological message. "I am a detective, I see the puzzle you are creating." This effect was psychological. As Minerva gained confidence and focus, Conan had successfully anchored her emotional state, validating that her signal had been caught. This facilitated a shift in her mindset from a helpless victim to an active partner. Empowered by this connection, she proceeded to play a perfect game, smashing the ball with absolute accuracy, spelling out "Game Set Death Mum" in Braille on the court, a feat of physical execution she could never have performed without Conan managing her fear from the sidelines. It also shows both Conan and Minerva's general intelligence in such a scenario. Moving on, this next feat is less about Conan solving a trick and more about him stepping into the emotional logic of a woman who has already decided her life is over. Serina is a woman with impaired hearing who orchestrated the murders of 3 bank robbers. Then, Conan uncovers the motive driving her: revenge for Kenya, a bank employee she deeply cared for who died because of the robbery. But the way she carries out her plan is rushed and reckless, makeshift setups, sloppy risk management, and little regard for what happens to her afterward. The Conan is the first warning sign. Through perspective analysis of her behavior, Conan realizes the deeper truth. Serina is likely going to harm herself. The revenge is her last remaining attachment to life, and once she finishes punishing the robbers, she may intend to end her own life as well. She is already at the edge. 3 murders behind her, her emotional world collapsed into grief and retribution, and no future she believes is worth living after the final act. This is where the emotional facilitation begins, as Conan doesn't try to shut her down with threats, moral lectures, or abstract arguments about why self-harm is wrong. Instead, he meets the emotion at the center of her breakdown. He shows a genuine concern for her well-being, and more importantly, identifies the one remaining purpose strong enough to compete with her death wish: the unresolved identity of the 3rd female robber. Conan turns that unfinished justice into her only lifeline. He offers partnership, promising to help her uncover the truth and reach the real closure. By anchoring her to that final, meaningful goal and reminding her she isn't alone, Conan redirects her momentum away from self-destruction. He stabilizes a person spiraling towards self-harm and prevents the situation from turning into an even greater tragedy. And that's what makes this moment so impressive. Under life or death emotional pressure, Conan successfully manages someone else's state of mind, using empathy and purpose to pull her back from the brink. Moving on, we have emotional understanding, which is an ability that is built upon an understanding of the complexity of emotions. While many people have the ability to recognize basic facial expressions, fewer of them are able to predictably recognize and understand emotional language and to appreciate the nuances of complex emotional relationships. Now, let's examine Conan's 2 most impressive demonstrations of this ability. First, this goes back to the 12 million hostage case. A bomber who had been dormant for 7 years returns with an elaborate scheme to plant bombs across Tokyo. The first bomb is at Tokyo Tower, with a coded riddle revealing the second bomb's location at Lond's High School only when the timer hits 3 seconds, as explained before in the VCI section. The bomber is testing the police's morality. Will they sacrifice themselves to get the clue or let the second bomb detonate? The entire investigation is broadcast live, and the bomber remains completely anonymous. Conan never meets him face to face, only hearing about him through Sato's testimony. Through pure psychoanalysis from second-hand information, Conan achieves something extraordinary. He mind reads his ideology. Specifically, Conan grasps the bomber has deep contempt toward the police and wants to expose their moral integrity, a specific desire to reveal hypocrisy. Conan profiles the bomber's overconfidence so thoroughly that he can predict the bomber will be at an eye-catching location near the second bomb to witness his handiwork. He understands that this overconfidence comes with a need to see the effects of his actions. Most impressively, Conan emphasizes with the bomber's internal struggle. The bomber is genuinely torn about whether police officers should die for the public or the public should die to shame the police. Not something as simple as wanting people to die emotion, but it's a complex philosophical conflict. Conan accurately inferred the bomber's core belief that giving up your life for another person is pointless. What makes this so impressive is that Conan achieves this understanding despite no direct communication with the bomber, only second-hand accounts. From there, he understands 5 layers of emotional masking by the bomber: subtle contempt masked as calculated behavior, overconfidence masked as patient deliberation, etc. Then on top of that, there were 6 layers of psychological toll on Conan himself, whether that be time pressure, publicized investigation, suppressing fear for none, threat of death, and allowing the timer to hit 3 seconds before the clue. Despite that, Conan still understands the bomber's intricate drive and specific choices. To sum it up a bit, most people can understand he's angry at the police, but Conan understands the philosophical framework that makes the bomber believe sacrifice is foolish, a much deeper level of emotional and psychological comprehension, making it a standout feat for emotional understanding. Next off, we have a more subtle scenario, but still an impressive showing of emotional understanding. For context, Lan's middle school friend Aya, a supermarket employee, is falsely accused of shoplifting. After Lan investigates and discovers the real thief has been hiding in the store after closing hours, she calls Kudo via phone so he's absent from the scene. Kudo must solve the case using second-hand information from Lan and Sonoko and deduce the thief's psychological profile. To do that, he even mentally maps one of Lan's suspects, the supermarket salesperson, onto the thief's mindset, using that comprehension to sharpen his remote profile despite never meeting the culprit. And here's a challenge. The thief is stealing, which makes him appear as a malicious criminal, but Kudo understands something more nuanced. The thief is actually fundamentally good-natured, driven by circumstances rather than malice. Specifically, Kudo perceives guilt, remorse, and moral boundaries. The thief took a month-long hiatus from stealing after Aya was scolded by her boss. Kudo interprets this as genuine remorse, as the thief felt bad that Aya got in trouble. Kudo predicts that the thief only consumes nearly expired goods. This isn't to just avoid detection, but more about moral boundaries, trying to minimize harm to the store even while stealing. Then, Kudo interprets the thief's cautious behavior as consistent with someone trying to survive while limiting harm. What makes this feat so extraordinary is that Kudo must see through 15 different layers that mask the thief's true nature. First, stealing makes him appear notorious, not good-natured. Second, his remorse for involving Aya is masked by his stealing actions. Third, the month-long hiatus appears more like calculative caution than remorse. Fourth, the hiatus could be fear rather than remorse. Fifth, he could be lying low to access security measures. Sixth, he could be stockpiling food temporarily. Seventh, he could be feeling stressed rather than remorseful. Eighth, he could have found temporary support elsewhere. 9th, consuming expired goods could be calculative to avoid detection. 10th, expired goods might just be what's accessible. 11th, avoiding fresh goods could be to minimize punishment if caught. 12th, he could be viewing expired goods as waste anyway to justify his actions. 13th, Kudo never directly interacts with the thief, so he can read body language. 14th, cautious actions hiding trace could be self-protection from fear, not guilt. 15th, desperation to survive could make actions appear selfish and not remorseful. Plus 2 additional layers to difficulty, as Kudo must visualize the supermarket layout remotely, and he's working with second-hand, incomplete information from Ran and Sonoko that could be biased. Each of those 15 layers represent an equally plausible alternative interpretation. Most people would stop at he's stealing because he's a thief, but Kudo peels through every layer to reveal the truth. He's a good person in desperate circumstances. And I'll say this again, Kudo never meets the thief. He's doing this entirely through second-hand information and logical inference about behavioral patterns. Understanding that someone committing crimes was actually morally good requires sophisticated emotional understanding, recognizing that actions and character can diverge under extreme circumstances, and correctly identifying which is which. So, to sum it all up, despite having no direct interaction with the thief and relying solely on fragmented second-hand clues, Conan is able to cut through a heavily constructed facade hiding the culprit's real personality. Layer by layer, he strips away the misdirection surrounding the thief's motives, not only identifying who they are, but also recognizing that their intentions are ultimately benevolent. It highlights Conan's ability to navigate complex deception and accurately judge someone's true character even when they've worked extremely hard to conceal it. Next off, we have emotional management. Emotional management represents the highest level of the ability model of emotional intelligence. It refers to a person's ability to regulate emotions, both in themselves and in others, to maintain control, steer interaction, and achieve specific outcomes. Those with strong emotional management can consciously adjust emotional states even in the most challenging circumstances. Let's start with a feat from Haibara. Haibara, real name Shiho Miyano, former black organization codenamed Sherry, is introduced as one of the most tragic characters in Detective Conan. She was a former black organization scientist who helped develop the APTX-4869 drug that was weaponized against Kudo, but she was also a victim of her own creation when the drug was used on her as well, shrinking her into a child. Her sister Akemi was killed by the black organization, and Ai herself is actively hunted and targeted for assassination. On top of that, her trauma goes back even further, being childhood isolation from being labeled Ainoko or half-breed by American peers for her Asian face, leading to isolation and the loss of her parents by the very organization she was eventually forced to work for. So, when Conan meets Haibara, her psychological state is filled with identity issues, social isolation, trauma-related stress, chronic stress and anxiety, feeling of powerlessness, body dysmorphia from her former adult state, hypervigilance, constant fear of encountering black organization members, PTSD with nightmares, specifically nightmares of Jin, and emotional numbness, as well as severe guilt over creating the drug used against Kudo and others. She's so emotionally devastated that she's essentially giving up on living. This is where Conan engages in sustained efforts to manage Haibara's emotional state and facilitate or manage her recovery. First, he establishes safety and trust. Even though he was personally harmed by the drug she created, he protects her and treats her as a confidant rather than an enemy, knowing that blame would only deepen her collapse. Next, he redirects the emotional narrative. Instead of allowing her guilt to consume her, Conan reframes the core target of that pain toward the real enemy, the black organization. The story shifts from "I'm a monster" to "we're victims who can fight back." And crucially, he validates her worth. By valuing her maturity and expertise, he restores a sense of purpose to someone who feels empty and beyond redemption. Through this emotional management, Conan transforms Haibara into a key ally who actively contributes to the mission. Most importantly, his long-term influence helped her build confidence to confront the black organization that destroyed her life. Think about what that means. Someone with severe PTSD, nightmares, hypervigilance, and emotional numbness goes from being paralyzed by fear to actively working against the source of her trauma. This is one of the hardest possible emotional landscapes to navigate, and Conan isn't a trained therapist and he's just a teenage detective. Yet his emotional influence is powerful enough to turn despair into determination with nothing but trust, reframing, and steady support. And unlike a temporary motivational boost, this change is long-lasting. Haibara is stabilized and grows into someone who can stand against her abusers. That's why this feat belongs at the peak of emotional management. Next, we have to take a quick look at the 12 million hostage case again. As you already know, during the infamous 12 million hostage case, Conan faces an almost impossibly high-pressure situation. He's trapped inside the core of Tokyo Tower with a bomb, tasked with defusing it despite having no prior bomb disposal experience. The stakes are absolutely catastrophic, and the situation is further complicated by emotional triggers. Ran, the girl he loves, is at the second bomb location of Taetan High School. The entire investigation is broadcasted live, albeit from the outside. Time constraints. He must decode a complex riddle while the timer counts down. Death threat. He allows the bomb timer to reach 3 seconds to obtain a crucial clue, maximizing his proximity to death. physical limitations. He's doing all this in a 7-year-old body. So, despite all these emotional triggers that would paralyze most people, Conan successfully suppresses his fear and concern for Lan and the public to maintain laser focus on 2 simultaneous cognitive tasks. First, decoding the bomber's riddle to locate the second bomb. Second, learning to defuse a bomb from scratch through phone guidance. Conan has to keep his own emotions in check, the fear for unsafety, the concern for everyone in danger. If he let those feelings take over, it would cloud his ability to read the bomber's mindset clearly as well. So, he suppresses his own emotional responses to stay fully focused on profiling the threat as well as solving the puzzle. And then, even acknowledging that emotional suppression might somewhat limit his emotional analysis of the bomber, Conan still successfully profiles the bomber's psychology, predicts his location, and saves millions of lives, all while managing the terror of potentially dying and failing everyone. This demonstrates emotional management at an extreme level, maintaining cognitive performance while suppressing overwhelming fear, personal emotional investment, and survival instinct. Most people, even somewhat smart characters, will be emotionally incapacitated by even one of these stresses. Conan manages all of them simultaneously while performing complex deduction and learning a technical skill in real time. With that said, that will be the end for emotional intelligence. Next off, logical reasoning. But before we begin, let's establish the framework. Logical reasoning is the backbone of intelligence, the ability to analyze information, identify relationships, and draw valid conclusions based on evidence and sound inference rules. When scaling logical reasoning, we examine 3 core types: deductive, inductive, and abductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning involves drawing conclusions from premises that are known or assumed to be true. It's top-down logic, where the conclusion necessarily follows from the premises. Think of the classic syllogism: all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. With that established, let's examine Detective Conan's best feats, starting from deductive reasoning. Let's go back and visit the 12 million hostage case to see how truly impressive it is. Conan faces one of the most demanding deductive challenges in the entire series. An anonymous bomber has planted explosives across Tokyo, threatening 12 million citizens. The culprit operates with complete anonymity, total field control, and surveillance through wiretraps planted through the city. He's listening to everything, including Conan's conversation inside Tokyo Tower. Conan must decode a multi-layered cipher while simultaneously diffusing a live bomb from scratch inside his 7-year-old body. On top of that, the bomb is rigged with a mercury lever trap in an elevator, meaning the slightest shake triggers detonation. Time is running out, and the final bomb destination is hidden in a code so convoluted that it would stump most characters in fiction. The code Conan receives is originally in Japanese, but here's how it goes. I am a major leaguer, a strong pitcher as well as a batter. Now this is the beginning of an extended game. No use getting ready a good stopper, because I'll win in the end. From here, Conan begins by identifying the foundational premise. Premise 1. Major Leaguer refers to American baseball, a sports league. Deduction 1. The entire code must be translated into English to decode it. Premise 2. A good stopper in baseball terminology means a pitcher with strong earned run average or ERA statistics. Premise 3. Extended games in baseball are synonymously called extra inning games. Deduction 2. The abbreviation for earned run average is ERA. Then there is the big leap. Premise 4. If you remove ERA from extra, you're left with XT. Premise 5. When you write XD vertically and rotate it 180 degrees, it visually represents the kanji bun. Deduction 3. The kanji bun is the Japanese map symbol for school. Conclusion 1. The final bomb destination is a school. But Conan doesn't stop there, as the bomb he's defusing has an LCD panel that flashes the critical clue in the final 3 seconds, EVIT. Premise 6. EVIT are the final 4 letters of detective, spelled in reverse, EVITCETED. Premise 9. The Japanese word for detective is tante. Premise 8. Reversing tante gives you tetan, which is homophonous with tetan. Deduction 4. The school is named Tetan, but which Tetan school? There's an elementary school, middle school, and high school, and university. Premise 9. The bomber did not plant a fake bomb at the baseball park. Premise 10. This was deliberate to avoid drawing attention to schools with baseball grounds. Premise 9. During winter vacation, only one Tetan school has mass student gatherings. Premise 2. Tetan High School is holding national trial exams. Final conclusion. The final bomb is at Taetan High School. I also covered this briefly in the VCI section, but let me explain why it's so good. Every single step follows necessarily from previous. There's no guesswork or abduction, no induction as well, just pure deduction. And the premise detection is absolutely difficult here, as Conan had to recognize that Major Leaguer means translate everything to English, Good Stopper to ERA, remove from extra, then visually rotate in the kanji, EVIT on a bomb LCD panel, then reverse detective, Japanese reversal, then Taetan. Also, as I mentioned before in the emotional intelligence section, Conan was under extreme stress while also psychoanalyzing the bomber, yet still, he synthesized two separate cipher systems, the original code on the LCD hint, and connected them flawlessly under a ticking countdown while defusing a bomb he learned to disarm on the spot. And he did this while the bomber was listening to him through wire traps, forcing Conan to misdirect by pretending he couldn't solve it. The sheer complexity, time pressure, multi-stage logical chains, translation requirements, and visual spatial manipulation, as well as deciphering the code with extreme VCI, makes this one of the hardest deductive reasoning feats in anime. Now, let's move on to inductive reasoning, the ability to observe specific instances and extract a general truth from the pattern they form. Think of the classic example. Every crow I've seen is black, therefore all crows are probably black. It's a bottom-up logic. From this, let's now take a look at the Mermaid case, his best showing of inductive reasoning. The Isle of Mermaids hosts a festival legend, a 130-year-old elder who supposedly gained immortality from mermaid flesh. She distributes dugong arrows, charms said to grant eternal life. 3 women connected to these arrows are murdered in rapid succession. Toshimi hanged at a waterfall, Naoko strangled, and Kimie burned in a warehouse identified via dental records. But here's a problem. 3 years prior, a mermaid corpse was found in the same warehouse, a burnt body with no leg bones. The island accepted it as supernatural, and Kimie was supposedly alive and well unto now. So, Conan's task is to untangle a multi-layered scheme spanning years, hidden behind cultural superstition and 16 layers of misdirection. However, Conan doesn't have a single piece of direct evidence pointing to the killer. What he has are specific, disconnected observations. First, the elder's visibility is extremely limited, as the only appearance during the festival always in heavy ceremonial makeup. Second, Kimie is an exceptional makeup artist. Rokuro explicitly mentions this. Third, Kimie defends the elder too personally. When Heiji suggests the elder might have stolen something, Kimie immediately fires back, saying she'd never do that with absolute certainty, as if she's defending herself, which is the twist. Heiji is speaking to Kimie while she's still alive in front of everyone. But the plan is designed so that later, the warehouse body gets officially labeled as Kimie through dental records, turning her into a legal ghost. Fourth, the mermaid corpse 3 years ago was staged so the legs weren't perceived as legs, positioned/obscured to resemble a mermaid tail, and the locals accepted the supernatural explanation without question. Fifth, Kimie took Saori to the dentist and had the opportunity to swap insurance IDs, meaning Saori's teeth were worked on under Kimie's name, because the clinic files dental work under the registered identity. Swapping IDs make the dental profile police later rely on point to the wrong person. And one detail changes the scale. Only the elder know the dugong arrow winners in advance, meaning the elder is uniquely positioned to pre-select targets before anyone else can realize they've been chosen. And individually, these are disconnected facts, behavioral quirks, and environmental details. From these specific instances, Conan induces a single general truth. Kimie has been impersonating the 130-year-old elder for years. And once that principle is established, everything clicks in. The elder's rare public appearances was necessary to maintain the disguise. Heavy festival makeup was for identity concealment. Kimie's intimate knowledge of the elder's personality was because she is the elder. The mermaid corpse 3 years ago was Kimie's own mother, legs bent and tied to simulate a mermaid tail, reinforcing island superstition and diverting suspicion. The dental record switch is because Kimie killed Saori, burned her body, and used the rigged records to fake her own death, allowing her to continue living as an elder while officially being dead. In other words, the warehouse corpse is Saori's body. It's only identified as Kimie because the dental records were engineered to say so. By becoming the elder, Kimie controlled the dugong arrow lottery. She selected her victims because the elder knows the winners in advance. She isn't reading, but she can plan around targets before anyone else even knows who's marked. She hid behind the island's reverence for immortality itself. But what exactly makes his feat so impressive? Let me explain. Conan didn't have forensic evidence or fingerprint that screamed the culprit. What he had were behavioral patterns, forensic inconsistencies, and a cultural noise that everyone else accepted as normal. So he observed a makeup artist was capable, limited elder visibility, opportunity, overly precise defense, psychological slip, staged supernatural evidence, forensic misdirection. Only the elder knows the arrow winners in advance, control over targeting. And from those scattered data points, he induced a year-long identity deception that contradicted the accepted reality of an entire island community. The scheme had fooled everyone for years. Police investigators, even Heiji, the second best detective in Detective Conan series, was left stunned when Conan revealed his conclusion. Labels aside, the impressive part is simple. Conan turned several small oddities into one hidden rule that explains everything. Yes, there are deductive and abductive components here. Conan deduces that if Kimie went to the dentist with Saori, the record could have been swapped. He abducts that the mermaid corpse was deliberately staged, but the core engine is inductive pattern synthesis with a strong abductive core. So with this, Conan demonstrates masterful inductive reasoning, building a unified conclusion from scattered, seemingly unrelated observations across years of deception, as I'll say again. He induced a truth that contradicted the accepted reality of an entire community, cutting through 16 layers of misdirection to expose a killer hiding behind cultural superstition itself. Moving forward, abductive reasoning is inference to the best explanation. It's about looking at fragmented, ambiguous evidence and constructing the most likely hypothesis that unifies everything. And the Water Palace of the Five-Color Legend is exactly that. At a traditional riverside castle, the elderly master is found hanged from a ceiling beam inside a locked tea room positioned directly over the river. The scene only looked like self-delete, but critical details don't align. The room was locked from inside with no forced entry. Everyone has an airtight alibi, and the death occurred at exactly 4 PM, the precise moment when the estate's pond turns crimson due to the natural light phenomena. Therefore, Conan's challenge is to reconstruct an entire automated murder mechanism he never witnessed, using only statistic aftermath. And here's what makes this fundamentally abductive. Conan isn't working backward from known facts, but he's generating hypotheses to explain anomalies. Each observation raises a question, and each answer spawns the next inference. So, the core abductive chain would go like this. Observation 1. There are locked rooms plus universal alibis, plus precise 4 PM timing. So the question is, how can someone hang a victim while provably elsewhere? Hypothesis 1. The murder was automated, triggered by a time delay mechanism tied to the predictable 4 PM phenomenon. Observation 2. A decorative windmill sits submerged in the river. The pond's crimson shift occurs when water currents change at 4 PM. The question is, what could serve as an environmental trigger with that level of precision? Hypothesis 2. The windmill isn't decorative, but when it spins at 4 PM, it acts as a winch, winding a rope connected to the victim. Observation 3. There are burn marks on the railing, paint scratches, a hanging scroll only positioned near the door, a spring mechanism assembled from removable wood, a thumbnack, and a rubber band. So the question is, how do these unrelated elements connect? Hypothesis 3. They form a synchronized system. The windmill pulls the body upward, and the rising corpse knocks the scroll loose. The falling scroll releases the door, and the spring locks into the pillar hole. A pre-weakened rope section snaps under tension, and the windmill continues pulling the severed evidence out through the window. Therefore, the result is a perfectly staged locked room self-delete, door sealed from the inside, and no visible mechanism, and no trace of the killer. But Conan isn't finished just with this. Observation 4. Everyone was watching the only visible corridor on the tea room. The killer would have been soaked. Mr. Yaguda took a bath immediately afterward. So the question is, How did the killer reach the tea room undetected? Hypothesis 4. He swam underneath the corridor, a blind spot no one considered. Observation 5. Mr. Yaguda caused a loud argument at exactly 4 p.m., drawing everyone's attention. Hypothesis 5. The distraction was deliberate, to prevent anyone from noticing the body being mechanically hoisted during the critical window. So, from 6 static observations, a windmill, burn marks, a scroll, door mechanics, a bath, and a stage argument, Conan reconstructed, first, a 12-stage mechanical execution sequence. Second, rope physics involving a fisherman's knot that tightens when pulled. 3. Rational to linear force conversion via windmill mechanics. 4th, a spring-loaded door system with time release. 5th, a hidden underwater approach route. 6. Psychological misdirection timed to the second. So, he mentally simulated tension thresholds, serving points under load, winding speed, rope trajectory through windows, body collision angles, and environmental synchronization, all without witnessing a single moment of that setup. This is the essence of this abduction. He built an entire mechanical reality from fragments of possibility, a unified theory that simultaneously explained 7 independent anomalies no one else could connect. 7 mysteries solved. So, this feat represents Conan's most complex abductive reconstruction in anime. He reverse engineered an automated murder from scattered forensic afterimages, a cognitive simulation so intricate it borders on engineering in reverse, peak inference to the best explanation. With that said, let's now move on to manipulation. But before we dive into Conan's manipulation feats, let's establish something critical. Manipulation is by far his weakest category. This isn't to say he is incompetent, far from it, but when you stack his manipulation abilities against his deductive reasoning, strategic planning, or emotional intelligence, the gap becomes evident. After all, Conan is mainly a detective character. Now, it's important to clarify what counts as manipulation. Deception, whether through bluffing, fabrication, or misdirection, falls under manipulation when the goal is to influence someone's belief, emotions, or decisions. It's not simple as lying, but it's about leveraging that lie to guide your target toward a specific outcome. If Conan deceives someone purely to extract information or force a confession, that's manipulation. But if he's simply explaining his deduction to the police, that's not. And also, manipulation is very strong when utilized in conjecture with strategy and planning. With that distinction made, let's examine Conan's strongest manipulation, the phone recording trap. The context is that someone's been injured in what appears to be an accident. Conan loses his phone at the scene. He doesn't know who the culprit is yet, but he knows someone among the suspects has it. And whoever picked up that phone is sitting on a potential piece of evidence that could expose them. So, Conan doesn't confront anyone yet or accuse anyone. Instead, he orchestrates a psychological trap that exploits the culprit's vulnerability to possession of his phone and turns it into a ticking time bomb. First, Conan subtly plans the idea that his phone was recording audio this entire time. He mentions this casually to the police and the detective boys, making sure the suspects were within earshot. The implication of this is clear. Whoever picked up the phone is now holding evidence of their own voice at the crime scene, setting in anxiety. But Conan goes further. He fabricates a story about Professor Agasa installing a transmitter inside the phone, making it impossible to hide or destroy without being traced. This amplifies the culprit's sense of urgency and eliminates potential escape routes. Now they need to delete that recording before anyone checks it. Then comes the fake solution. Conan pretends to be defeated when Haibara guesses his password, 4869. He subtly suggests this is the correct code to access his phone, offering the culprit what appears to be an easy way out. Delete the recording and the evidence disappears. The culprit, now operating under extreme psychological pressure, believes they have a narrow window to act. They sneak into a portable toilet to erase the recording in private. They enter the false password and the phone locks. An alert signals the incorrect entry. And in that moment, Conan's trap shuts in place. The culprit has just revealed themselves, caught not by direct evidence, but by their own desperate attempt to destroy it. This feat showcases indirect manipulation, psychological pressure, and orchestrated setups. Conan doesn't strong-arm his target or need emotional leverage or long-term control. Instead, he engineers a scenario where the culprit believes they're solving their own problem, when in reality, they're walking straight into his hands. But let's be clear. this is just situational manipulation. Conan excels at short-term, high-stakes scenario where he can exploit immediate vulnerabilities. He doesn't have the patience, interest, or methodology for long-term psychological control like Aina Korji's parasitic manipulation of K. As I'll say again, this would be his worst category by far. But with that said, let's move on to something different. Moving on to strategy and planning. Per usual, Conan's tactics will be judged with deception in mind. And for Conan, it will be a large scheme that encompasses both his planning and strategy, that being Akai's fake death. It starts in a hospital room, where Conan first planned the seeds that will make the entire scheme possible. During the hospital arc, the FBI was hiding Kiru, real name Rena Mizunashi, a black organization operative who was secretly working as a CIA double agent. While she lay unconscious after a car accident, the black organization wanted her back, and Conan suspected they had planted a spy among the hospital patients to locate her. If that spy reported Kiru's room, the black organization would raid the hospital. To identify the infiltrator, Conan devised a simple but effective test. He asked each patient to pick up his dropped cell phone and check if it was damaged. It looked like politeness, but it doubled as a way to narrow suspects, and later, it became the fingerprint setup the endgame would rely on. By cross-referencing their behavior, physical condition, and willingness to comply, Conan narrowed the spy down to one man, Kusara Rikumichi, a black organization member faking an injury. And here's where the long-term game begins. Conan sabotaged Kusara's phone to prevent him from reporting Kiru's location to the organization. This bought immediate time. But more importantly, Conan had Kusara touch his cell phone with his right hand during the identification test, unknowingly recording his fingerprints. But then, Kusara escaped and later committed self-delete. Conan recognized an opportunity. The organization didn't know Kusara was dead, and his corpse could serve as a future purpose. Simultaneously, Conan had already deduced Kiru's true alliance. Conan realized she was CIA and built the plan around that. But rather than expose her, Conan used it as leverage for a bigger play. He and Akai Shuichi, the FBI's most dangerous agent, known to the organization as the Silver Bullet, devised a plan to return Kiru to the organization in a way that appeared accidental. Using Camel, a skilled FBI driver, they staged a van crash and explosion, making it look like the organization had recaptured Kiru through their own efforts. They even staged specific poor moments that would look authentic to the black organization observers. So Kiru's return didn't feel like a handoff, but it felt like the FBI genuinely lost control of her. Therefore, the FBI's confusion was genuine and the authenticity was part of the deception. But Conan knew this wouldn't hold forever. Conan predicted that Jin, the organization's most ruthless enforcer, would find Kiru's retrieval suspicious. Why hadn't Akai, the FBI's elite agent, intervened during the escape? Why had everything gone so smoothly? These doubts, Conan anticipated, would reach the boss, and the boss would demand proof of Kiru's loyalty. And he was right. Jin commanded Kiru to contact Akai under the pretense of wanting to betray the organization, lure him to the meeting, and execute him. If she succeeded, her loyalty would be confirmed. What Jin didn't know was that Conan had already prepared that entire counter-strategy for exactly this scenario. Conan's plan had to fool 3 audiences simultaneously: Jin, watching in real time, the police who investigate afterward, and the FBI whose genuine shock would sell the deception. So here's how the execution worked. Akai wore a bulletproof vest and concealed blood packets. When Kiru fired at the chest, the vest absorbed the shots while the packets burst, simulating fatal wounds. But Conan knew Jin would demand confirmation, a headshot. From this, Conan prepared a blood spray mechanism hidden above Akai's hatline, plus a small blood packet inside Akai's mouth that he could pry open. When Kiru fired at his head, Akai triggered the blood spray and let the liquid run from his mouth, creating the appearance of a fatal headshot. His hand stayed in his pockets throughout, because his right hand was pressing a detonator to activate the blood effects at precisely the right moments. The performance alone wasn't enough, as Jin might still inspect the body, so Conan calculated the exact moment to call the police. When Jin heard approaching sirens, he was forced to order Kiru to leave immediately rather than risk a confrontation with the police. This bought the crucial second needed for the next phase. As Kiru moved to the front of Akai's truck to plant a bomb, her body blocked Jin's line of sight to the vehicle's interior. In that window, Akai swapped positions with Kusara's corpse, which had been dressed in Akai's clothing and placed in the car beforehand. Kid planted the explosive near the body, and Akai escaped before detonation. Then, the explosion incinerated almost everything, and I say almost. The key detail is that the right hand didn't burn completely. Conan had already set up a fingerprint misdirection. Kusara touched Conan's phone with his right hand, while Akai touched it using glue so his real prints wouldn't be left. That way, the usable prints linked to Akai would actually be Kusara's. After the blast, the surviving right-hand fingerprints were read as Akai's. Therefore, Akai was officially declared dead. And the organization believed it, and the official investigation confirmed it. And it wasn't just paperwork. The organization even sought confirmation by checking the FBI's reaction, reinforcing the conclusion that Akai was truly dead. But Conan's planning extended beyond the organization. He anticipated a second threat, Rei Furuya, codename Bourbon, a public security agent who had infiltrated the organization and harbored intense hatred for Akai. Rei possessed exceptional deductive ability, and Conan predicted he would eventually investigate whether Akai had truly died. Akai had been living in disguise as Okiya Subaru, using a voice-changing choker to mask his real voice. Conan deduced that they would eventually identify this, and that they would visit the Kudo residence to confirm his suspicion. So, Conan adapted before they could act. He moved Akai into a car with FBI agents Jody and Camille, removing him from the residence entirely. In Akai's place, Conan had his father, Yusaku Kudo, step in as Okiya, while his mother, Yukiko, appeared as Yusaku at a public ceremony to maintain the cover. But Conan knew they would be looking for the voice-changing choker, so instead of the choker, Yusaku wore a voice-changing mask, justified by the pretense of illness. And if they demanded he remove it, Conan had planned for that too. Yusaku would cough twice as a signal, and Conan, monitoring the entire encounter through hidden cameras, would speak through the mask speaker in real time, answering Rei's questions himself. Rei's investigation hit a dead end. The disguise held and the secret remained buried. This plan accounted for Jin's paranoia, forensic fingerprint analysis, the FBI's need for genuine shock, police response timing, evidence destruction, and a future investigator whose threat didn't even exist when the scheme was conceived. Conan reacted to problems, yes, but the impressive part is that the deception fooled a global criminal syndicate, an elite FBI unit, and a genius-level intelligence operative all at the same time, across multiple arcs. And the architect of the cognitive labyrinth was a 17-year-old within a 7-year-old's body. Now that will be all for his main categories. However, before finishing the video, it's worth highlighting an additional category that sits outside Conan's standard intelligence classifications, that being intuitive prediction, or what borders on clairvoyance like foresight. And this isn't the standard foresight you'd be thinking of, nor is it conventional logical reasoning. Rather, they are unrealistic, extreme feats where Conan demonstrates an almost supernatural ability to anticipate events, perceive hidden presence, and predict outcomes with unrealistic precision, often without tangible sensory input. So yes, basically clairvoyance. And of course, these moments are rare, but they're striking enough to warrant examination. They reveal what can only be described as a sixth sense. So let's quickly take a look at it. In one encounter, Conan was able to passively sense Kaito Kid's arrival. More remarkably, he could intuit Kid's exact thoughts in response to Haibara's comment. I guess even famous thieves have their limits. There was nothing to deduce from. Conan simply knew, as if he picked up on Kid's presence and mental state through sheer proximity or intuition. The feat demonstrates an ability to anticipate the movements of the world's sneakiest thief with seemingly supernatural accuracy, heightening his foresight of an opponent who specializes in misdirection or stealth. To add on to this, we go back to the supermarket feat, or convenience store case for more accuracy. For context, Lan was sensing a pressure to solve the case for Aya, being worried whether her theories were right or not. And in that exact moment, Conan, out of nowhere, senses that Lan is in trouble, going out of his way to call Lan and solve the case or help her solve the case himself. These feats don't fit neatly into traditional intelligence categories, as they are very unrealistic. However, it's almost preternatural awareness that allows Conan to perceive information others cannot. However, with that said, we've hit the core of what makes Detective Conan so smart. Across the major categories, his FSIQ, emotional intelligence, logical reasoning, manipulation, and strategy/planning. You've seen the most defining displays of what his mind can do when it's pushed to the absolute brink. But let's be real, this series has 1000 plus episodes. There's no way to capture every single deduction, every microfeed, every one-off genius moment without making the video longer than the anime itself. And a lot of the time, the extra showings aren't new tiers or intelligent, but they're more proof of the same thing. Conan repeatedly dismantles chaos again and again under pressure, although I may have skipped over some of Conan's feats that are more impressive and I could talk about, but stick around to this channel to see more videos related to him in the future. But if nothing else, I hope this breakdown makes you understand the scale of his intelligence and why he's called the Heisei's Holmes or the modern Sherlock. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.